Biological, Earth and Space Sciences, and what a week we're having. There's so much happening with the cyclone and all the activity around the northern and far north Queensland, so hopefully it's finding you safe and well. So to get started, our topic this week is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, and I'd really just like to begin with the first word from Noel Pearson, and he cautions us: beware the soft bigotry of low expectations. It's a very timely caution. This week, like you, I'm also affected by the cyclone. I've actually left from Townsville and residing in Cairns, working from there. So I'll record this today. This will be the content section of the week's work, and I will post the Moodle or the Zoom interactive session tomorrow in our usual time between 10 and 11. So let's get cracking on this one. We've got a fair bit to talk about. The introduction. The topic examines the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's ways of knowing and perspectives. And here we're talking big discourse, big D discourse and little d discourse, if you want to use the James G terms and from linguistics. A big D discourse, a capital D discourse, is a perspective that is a worldview, a way of seeing the world, seeing the people in it, their relationships with each other, and also with their environment. So it's a big discourse, it's global, and there are First Nations people all around the world. It may come as a surprise to you to realise that Canada is, one of the world's leaders in First Nations research, particularly with their education processes and policies. So, and Justin Trudeau is a very progressive Prime Minister, so I'm sure that will continue. The second thing about an Aboriginal perspective, it's something that recognises and values Aboriginal culture and identity. Now, I've provided a little link here for you to choose and follow. It comes from the Kids Matter website. Now, the Kids Matter website was put together in a collaboration between Indigenous animators and elders and the Australian Psychological Society. And they're 12 short videos. And what they do is they actually build on the principles of Indigenous education and culture. And they try to support the health and well-being of Indigenous children. So they're fabulous stories, and they're all about reversing the potential for negative mindsets and imbuing that with a much more positive worldview. So the real focus of these 12 videos is to build resilience amongst Indigenous learners. And the third point we're going to make this week is that science should be taught in ways that recognise the influence of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's perspectives and the way they learn. And the term we use here is context. Context is everything. And it's something that we are probably quite well aware of ourselves. The learning outcomes, 3 of them. Explain, describe, analyse. Okay, all scientific processes. You should be able to explain the experience, culture and scientific knowledge of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people to promote cross-cultural understanding. Pause there for a moment. Cross-cultural understanding. Now, this is not a missionary position. We are not going to Indigenous culture to make our simple, to dumb down our culture so that it can be digested more easily by Indigenous perspectives. What we're doing is we are going for a cross-cultural experience. We are going to share culture and receive culture. And this is what the scientific classroom does best. Share the cultural of wondering, testing, observing, with the culture of measuring, capturing and describing. These are the cultures that we're sharing, and we're going to give culture as much as we're going to receive it. We'll share worldviews and we'll receive worldviews. The second thing we're going to do is describe how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's views can be incorporated into planning, design and delivery of science teaching and learning. A challenge, but that's actually the fun bit, because there's some wonderful mythologies and some very, very common sense explanations of how the world came to be as it is. And the third point, we're going to analyse the 8 Aboriginal ways of learning framework. Really important, because these ways of learning actually are the bedrock for understanding. Key terms: diversity, recognise, respect and value people's differences. To contribute, okay, and from contribution, of course, the contributing student also then changes the outcome, don't they? They're not digesting an outcome, they're actually interacting with knowledge to produce new knowledge. They're a co-creator, they're a co-learner. So it's really important to get different perspectives into curriculum. Indigenous means originating in a certain place or region. We know, for instance, the Maori people are Indigenous to New Zealand. We have the Canadians, the Kanakas. We have Indigenous and First World Nations people globally. Okay? The educational principles we're exploring here today are tested across many of those communities. And Aboriginal education, working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, as well as teaching Aboriginal perspectives to all students. So, it's about non-Indigenous students as much as it is Indigenous students, creating that cultural exchange process and facilitating it as a teacher. A couple of places to start. Here we go. Some images there of my old smiling dial. But I want to start from the Science Fair Station, Activity 1. And the quote here I want to share with you is from Crawford, who wrote back in 1982 about games. Games are the most ancient and time-honoured vehicle for education. They are the original educational technology. We don't see mother lions lecturing cubs at the chalkboard. We don't see senior lions writing their memoirs for posterity. In light of this, the question, can games have educational value, becomes absurd. And here's the important bit. It's not games, but schools that are the newfangled notion, the untested fad, the violator of tradition. Game playing is a vital educational function for any creature capable of learning. Crawford is capturing here a position from Michel Foucault. Schools have come along and really all they've done is colonise what we've been doing for many, many years. The example here I'm using relates to robotics. And it's a field where I've had some degree of experience and also some degree of success and fun. But there's a global challenge every year, and this year it was related to the energy crisis facing the world. So up here, the students had to tackle the power puzzle. The robots became the artefact. They became, if you like, the science or the cosmos through which students worked to deal with the mythology of a power problem. So they were the science. And as you can see, we brought to that science mathematics, we brought engineering, we brought literacy, we brought science. All of these different solutions came to become embedded in this one artefact. Okay, and the robot is like a piece of string around your finger. You tie a string around your finger to remind you to do something. The robot is simply an artefact that carries the solution, the technical solution, to a social or scientific problem. And finally, the impact of the robots down in the bottom image here goes to show that robots became very, very useful, very, very dynamic science fair tools for helping kids explore some of the more complex design solutions around some of our future science problems. So we decided to take that one step further, and we had a look at the art and cultural components. So we came up with robot dance as cultural expression. And I remember this group of 4 young Indigenous students, and they built this robot, this most amazing robot. And it was black, and it also wore the colours of the Chabakai people. And they programmed this robot to actually dance the kangaroo dance. And they did it while 2 of the young students played didgeridoos, and another one had the sticks. And they had this tribal music going, which they created, and the robot, even though it was pre-programmed, began to move in accord with this music, and it transformed the entire room. We saw an infusion of culture with technology, an infusion of science and culture, an infusion of Indigenous perspectives. And quite frankly, it was a beautiful experience. Your Science Fair Station, whatever you decide to do, please make sure you connect it to the ACS. I've hyperlinked back there to the ACS 8.3. You'll notice it's the new live version. 7.5 is gone. So 8.3 is now the operative version in schools. Probably time to start viewing it. You can have a look here at the strands. Okay, we've got our science strands. You can see here our sub-strands. Make sure you embed your science fair exploration in the strands. It's really important that you embed it in the curriculum and get to know this curriculum document very, very well. It's also very, very important for assessment task number 1 that you do the same thing. Byron Lester, a great example. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the work you put on the post when everyone else is ducking for cover from high winds, so thank you. Byron's done it brilliantly. I really like the way he set out the structure here. And he's gone into the Akara site and he's looked at Earth and Space Science substrand, okay, and he's actually identified the areas of that strand, the Earth's dynamic structure and its place in the cosmos. Cosmos, of course, meaning science. We've talked about that before. It's the science of dealing with the Earth's dynamic structures. The key concepts developed in the substrand are, and he lists them, Earth is part of a solar system, part of a large universe, subject to change within, okay, and over a time period or of time scales as a result of human interaction and of natural processes. So great to locate that, perfect. Through this substrand, students view Earth as part of a solar system, which is part of a galaxy, part of one of many universes, and explore the immense scales of time associated with space. And we go on. Byron does that very, very well. Thank you very much. And goes on then to explore down here, the year 1 descriptors, where he locates the focus for his strand activity. He then is going to focus on the processes of observation, observing change over time, and he links that to the relevant sky and landscape units curriculum descriptor standard 019. So you can see he's done all his curriculum work here. This is what a teacher does, okay? This is what you have to do on your placements. When your supervising teacher says, what are you doing, where are you coming from, why are you doing it? Here's a really good explanation. And then he describes his station, presented as a stand that uses the concept of science to compare the differences in the sky and landscape between night and day. Very simple. And the reasons why this occurs. So simple, this would be really powerful. For instance, it's observable that the sun rises in the morning, sets in the evening. Why? The moon also rises and sets. Why? This can also be related to Indigenous Dreamtime stories. Beautiful. Byron gets it. Well done, Byron. Thank you very much for sharing that. A good example for everyone. The next point I want to make is about Aboriginal education. Aboriginal education is actually made up of a couple of competing discourses. It's not just a clearly aligned and clearly situated field. We can see here that Aboriginal education, working with Aboriginal students in your classroom, means engaging with Indigenous and non-Indigenous students. So we have our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island students and we have our non-Indigenous students. Between them sits a divide. Between them sit different cultural understandings. You as a teacher are going to take that on head on. That is the area where Vygotsky would call your proximal zone of development. That is the area where you are going to teach science, where you are going to develop a new understanding of science. So even though poor old Lev Vygotsky in 1921 couldn't see the science we have now, he could not imagine it, he still had the foresight to imagine how we could teach it. Have a close look at it. It's a cultural exchange. We go into education to exchange our own culture with an alternate culture. The role of the teacher is to mediate that. We're no longer missionaries. Chris Garner, a great YouTube TEDx presentation, talks about Indigenous perspectives, getting the most out of Indigenous students, creating the most opportunities for them. He starts off with this wonderful video. Little cartoon. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb the tree. And it was Freud, first of all, in 1916, who said a goldfish that can't climb a tree isn't necessarily a stupid creature. So it's not a new discourse. Okay, that's Freud. That was 100 years ago for Freud. And we can see here the poor old elephant looks stunned. The penguin's perplexed. The monkey's pretty happy about it. But we can see, there's different range of outcomes. There's different potential there. And they're all going to have to make a different effort in order to get success. Now, here's the point Garner makes. Are we as a Western society trapped in an ideology of success where we think our potential, our genetic potential, our resources, our wealth, plus the effort we utilise, that is our good old Protestant ethic, is actually going to lead to aspects of success and promote success? What we're finding here, however, is Chris Garner bobbing up in the middle of this saying, wait a minute, when I walk into an Indigenous classroom, something's missing. I can see the potential in these kids. I sense the effort they're making. But what's missing for them is a context that's relevant to their own worldview, to their own discourse. What's missing is success and access to success. Teachers are trapped in Western ideologies. Potential by effort equals success. He said, what happens when we add context? So he tells his story in pictures. In the top left-hand corner, he tells us that 40% of Indigenous students stay at school. 76% of non-Indigenous students stay at school. After 10 years of his project, in the top right-hand corner, 40%, we've got the old scenario, 70%, 76%. We now can measure 58% of Indigenous kids staying at school. We can see the increase of 18% over a 7 to 10 year period, directly attributable in Garner's research to the relevant to context method. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, 32% of Indigenous students graduate to Year 12 in the Northern Territory, 71% of non-Indigenous. Huge gap. Look what happens in the last 7 years when we start to adopt relevant to context teaching strategies. In other words, numeracy and literacy are taught as part of someone's role in the community. If you are going into a mechanics role, you're taught literacy and numeracy around car mechanics, vehicle mechanics, machinery. If you're going to be a finance officer, that's your focus. If you're going to be a teacher's aide, that's your focus. If you're going to be a nurse's aide, that's your focus. So Garner builds this incredible context-rich situation. And you can see that of the kids that go through, right through to school, 96% of them, okay, are now continuing right through, okay, 96%. In activity 2, I went to the Kids Matter website to actually complete my task when I had a look at it there. And I like the Kids Matter. As I said, they're 12 videos designed by psychologists, produced and animated using Indigenous storytelling techniques and culture. And the APS actually wrote an article about the value of these particular resources. The reason why I've referenced this particular article here is because it actually gives you some very, very good explanations of the educational principles behind this. It really is worth a read. So what do they give us? It's powerful to see positive images of Aboriginal men and valuing men as fathers. There are positive messages for Aboriginal people of all ages in the animations. And when I view the Walk of Life video, it's a great little one, watch it, I can see my own life in there and the lives of my people. This brings us back to Garner's point. Potential, task by effort, multiplied by effort, plus relevant to our own context, is much more likely to lead to success for our educational and outcomes for students. Activity 3, your poster task. And here's where we direct you to have a look at what initiatives are going on to promote Indigenous perspectives in science. And of course, that involves including and creating access for Indigenous people. In the top left-hand corner, Science Pathways for Indigenous Communities. This focuses on rural and remote communities, primary and middle school students. Okay, and the aim, of course, is country projects, on-country projects, as the context for learning science linked to ecological knowledge. So we can see very much that Byron's little module would fit nicely in there. But notice the focus is rural and remote. And next project, Inquiry for Indigenous Science Students. The focus is on urban schools. And why not? Why can't urban schools do what rural and remote schools do so well? Cater for the individual differences. Hands-on, inquiry-based projects to increase student engagement and achievement in science. So we've got the rural component, we've got the urban component, and then down here in the bottom, the prime features retention. Middle school students, support and improve mathematics. Mathematics is a pathway to science, okay? And also to STEM careers. Now, we know that 7 of the top 10 jobs of the future, we don't even know what they are yet. But you can be guaranteed the majority of them will exist in the STEM, the science, technology, education and maths frameworks. Bachelor of Science extended. Here we can see the tertiary applications, the higher education applications. The University of Melbourne, for instance, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students who show potential but may not have the entry score to get straight in. So we start to throw away our Western definition of what success is and adapt a broad-based entry policy which creates access to talented students. The STEM Awards is the community component. We have STEM champions and scientists, teachers, educators, people working on country. Guju Guju, for instance, working with the 4 Mile clan down in Cairns, does a fabulous job of returning, repatriating country. And he's doing that with government grants. He's doing it with young teams of Indigenous people. He's training them in bush culture and bush tucker culture. Fabulous stuff happening there. The Aboriginal Summer School for Excellence in Technology and Science, assets. And as you can see here, it's year 10 and it's bringing them to a focus and is articulating. This is an articulation program to push them through into higher education. So there is a continuum. There is a whole range of strategies to bring Indigenous perspectives into science. Which brings us, of course, to our 8 ways of learning. Now, the text below is very jumbled. I do apologise that, but it is quoted verbatim from a discussion. Why is it that we treat all students fairly when all we do is assess them on the exact same activities? Why do we impose the same expectations on every child? What if we could simply make schooling relevant to every kid in the class, if we could design activities that made sense to their life? Well, the Aboriginal ways of learning suggests that for Indigenous students and Torres Strait Island students, we can. It's not my task to pull this apart this week, it's yours. But I am going to suggest this is an interwoven process. It's circular as well as interconnected. Your task this week was to understand how that works, how that framework could actually help you as a teacher facilitate work within Vygotsky's zone of proximal development to work more effectively with Indigenous students. What are the links to community? Every time I worked with Indigenous students, I began by telling people about my people, my story. How do you deconstruct and reconstruct? What is a narrative of a non-linear nature? What are the connections to land and country? What are the symbols and images, the people sitting around the circle? The circle represents the tribe. What is the importance of non-verbal communication? Learning maps, story sharing. Please have a good look at those Aboriginal ways of learning, because this is the cultural tools you have for working across that cultural divide. We can see that Garner raises this particularly well when he says people leave the schooling sector, and previously 33% of them were not employed past work. Now, because the community context is embedded in education, the employment context, the skill base, everything is embedded in their education, we are seeing 98% of them being employed that come through Chris Garner's education model. Context is everything. They're going through school, learning about themselves, developing the skills, developing the knowledge, developing the community contacts, developing the cultural strengths, and then taking that back to the community in the form of paid work and career. Back to Byron. He offers us some excellent examples once again. Byron, you bobbed up again, fantastic. Aboriginal science, and we can see that we can incorporate it in a whole range of strands here. Aboriginal people, the boomerang, what an amazing achievement in physics that was. The woomera, astronomy, the phases of the moon. We can go beyond that, for instance, the Aboriginal folk were much more au fait with astrology and astronomy long before the Greeks. They were amongst the first people to navigate from the northern to the southern hemispheres. Maths, sophisticated number systems. Navigation, traversing great continents, just using stars and oral maps. Landmarks. Land care, we know now about fertility, soil fertility, ethnobotanical knowledge. Certain plants need to be fired in order to not to seed, but to break open the pods. So the seeds could then be picked up by birds or by the wind, distributed so the plants could actually reproduce and survive. Sustainable land care. Chemistry, knowledge about bush medicine. My own experience, walking through British Garner, through the Brazilian forests up in up in the northern part of Brazil, and being led by a Ghanaian guide, and my partner got incredibly ill. We obviously ate something that was quite toxic or bad, very unwell. And so the guide and I went down to a tree, and he said, this is what we're looking for, and he found a particular tree, and we had to get bark from the tree. We had to bring it back, mix it with a certain leaf, and then we boiled the bark into tea. Within 3 hours, my partner had stopped vomiting. Within 6 hours, we were able to walk out of the Amazon forest. So I have a huge respect for bush chemistry. Warfare. Warfare is a great hub of innovation. Great hub of innovation. And you can imagine all the innovation that was going on in the Indigenous community at the advent of white settlement. A huge period of innovation. Byron, thank you again for your perspectives. Chris Garner, it's all about context. And he says in his video, the first thing that strikes me is the curriculum that we work with. We have set standards. And there is the fear that when we personalise a program for every student, that we are somehow lowering the standards. What a powerful statement that was. And how accurate that is. That when we go out on our own as a teacher, when we take a curriculum and we modify it, we feel that we're leaving ourselves vulnerable for critique. That we're somehow lowering the standards, that our position is somehow indefensible. It makes you wonder what's happened to our education system. Student feedback. Chris Garner offers this example from an email sent to him by a student who just graduated from year 12. I was so impressed with you adapting the programs so it would make sense for us. Because we are Aboriginals, we come from different backgrounds and have different culture and law. Our path is set in circles because of who we are and where we come from. The path for this year will get us towards our goals and dreams. All I'm saying is that I'm glad you and others had the time to look and made a change. A lot of passion there. What say we try to translate that passion into some discussion board activities? Let's see some postings in this distance cohort, not just about my link won't work, but please, let's get in there and say, what is going on here? What about this actually tugs at you? What is saying to you, there is something in here that I want to look at, something deeper where I want to go? Are we afraid as teachers to actually break out and become what Vygotsky wants us to become that cultural mediator? The classroom activity, this is the one where you have to actually use some of the ways of knowing, the 8 ways of knowing, to develop a classroom activity. How would you use one of these? And my favourite is the astronomy one, but please pick your own. How would you use one of them? Look at the 8 ways of knowing. How would you incorporate that? Please post it on the discussion board. Let's get a little bit of idea sharing here, please. We're not all working in our own lunchbox. When we talk about context and community, we are a community. So what say we start sharing? Have a close look at this activity and see how you go. The bush foods, the bush gardens activity is also very, very good. Seasons and calendars, I think you'll really like that one too. Jump in there, have a look. The 8 ways of knowing. How can you apply them? Our final picture is just a summary, just a mnemonic, just to prompt you what we've got going on here. We've got the mentors and counsellors on the outside are the nurturing guides. We've got the collective, the political, economic, the social and the spiritual. We've got the physical world. And below the physical world, we have the world of ancestors and culture. And we can see that, in this complex Indigenous world, everything is interconnected. If this is a map of our world, then our ways of knowing are the vehicles we use to get around this world. So think closely about that. Our parents, our teachers, our elders, are sitting outside the circle. But everything is connected. that note, please, I'm going to pause. Clearly you can see I'm having some computer issues, but I will pause. I will record this and hopefully post it in time for you all to see it before tomorrow's interactive Zoom session. Thank you for your attention.